images, no distractions, just rain or fire sounds, and a story. This narration is designed to help you relax, drift, or disappear into the dark. If you're still awake, comment below. What country are you listening from? And is this your bedtime? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future nights like this. The note was stuck to the inside of my front door, not the outside of inside. I had just come up from the basement, a glass of water in my hand, and there it was, square in the center of the white paint, written in black ink that bled slightly into the paper fibers. I know you moved the couch. That was all. 7 words. No signature, no greeting, no explanation. I froze with my hand, still on the doorknob. The thing is, I had moved the couch that morning, at 9:47 a.m. to be exact. I know because I checked the timestamp on my phone when I texted my sister a photo of the new layout. But I live alone. No one else has a key. The deadbolt was still engaged. The chain was on, and I had not left that door open for more than the 2 seconds it took to bring in the mail at noon. The air in the hallway felt suddenly cold, though the thermostat read 72. I pulled the note off and held it under the porch light. The paper was warm, freshly written. I checked every camera feed for the next hour. I have a Ring doorbell, 2 indoor cams facing the front and back doors, and a motion-activated trail cam I'd set up in the backyard after a raccoon got into the trash last month. No one entered the house between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. The indoor cam I placed in the living room, the one that covers the front door, and the hallway leading to the kitchen shows me walking past at 9:47 with the couch dolly, then returning empty-handed at 9:52. The door never opens. The hallway stays empty. So how did the note get there? My name is Maya Chen. I'm 34, a freelance graphic designer, and I moved into this house on Castleton Street in Portland's Brooklyn neighborhood 3 months ago. It's a quiet, tree-lined block where neighbors wave but never linger. I chose it because I needed space after my breakup with Leo, because I wanted to be alone. That's my flaw. Pull away. I assume silence means safety. That night, I sat on that moved couch until 2 a.m., staring at the note, convincing myself it was a prank. A neighbor kid, a leftover from the previous tenant. I put it in the kitchen drawer and went to bed. I didn't sleep. Let me tell you about Castleton Street. It's one of those Portland streets that feels older than it is mature maples overhang the cracked sidewalks. And the houses are mostly 4-square bungalows from the 1920s with updated vinyl siding. My unit is the lower half of a duplex at 1432. The upstairs neighbor, a retired nurse named Mrs. Kowalski, is barely their chef, spends winters in Arizona, and the rest of the year watching Jeopardy at a volume that vibrates my ceiling. I liked the place immediately. The landlord, a man named Derek, who never makes eye contact, showed it to me in October. He mentioned the previous tenant had moved out suddenly after 7 years. Family emergency back east, he said, handing me the key. Left some stuff in the basement. I'll have it cleared out by your move-in date. But when I arrived on November 1st, the basement was still full. Boxes marked kitchen and BOOKS. And one large trunk with a combination lock. I texted Derek. He said he'd send someone. No one ever came, and I let it sit. I told myself I'd deal with it later. That was my second mistake. The first was ignoring the note. The basement is accessed through a door in the hallway that leads down unlit wooden stairs. It smells like damp concrete and old cardboard. The day after the note appeared, I decided to face the previous tenant's belongings head-on. I needed something to do, some small act of control. I pulled the boxes out one by one, breaking them down and stacking the flat cardboard by the back door. Most contained ordinary things. Mismatched plates, faded paperback novels, a collection of souvenir shot glasses from state parks. But the trunk wouldn't open. I tried the combination 000, 123, anything obvious. It held firm. I considered bolt cutters, but something stopped me. A feeling low in my stomach, like I wasn't supposed to be the one opening it. I left it there, half buried under a tarp I'd found in the corner. That night, I searched the previous tenant's name online. Derek had called him Mr. Albright during the showing. I typed Samuel Albright into Google. Portland Property Records showed a Sam Albright at this address from 2016 to 2023. No obituary, no social media, nothing else. He vanished from the internet like he never existed. The second note came 3 days later. I found it tucked under the windshield wiper of my Cara 2018 Honda Civic, parked in the driveway. This time, the message was longer. You shouldn't have moved those boxes. She was happy where she was. That word stuck in my throat like a bone. I brought the note inside and laid it next to the first one on the kitchen table. The handwriting was identical sloppy, but deliberate. The letters leaning left. I called Derek. His voicemail picked up. I left a message saying I'd found strange notes, asking if the previous tenant had any issues with trespassers. He never called back. I called the non-emergency police line. An officer came by the next afternoon, a young man Officer Tran, who looked around my age and took notes without much interest. Probably a neighbor playing games, he said. Keep your doors locked. Call us if it escalates. He left a card. I taped it to the fridge, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't wrong, and that wasn't comforting, because the neighbor playing games would have to know things, like that I moved the couch, like that I opened the boxes, like that I was alone. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow, a chef's knife I'd gotten in a wedding gift set with Leo. One of the few things I kept after the split. I know how that sounds, like every horror movie cliche. But when you live alone and someone is leaving notes in your locked house, rationality dissolves. I checked the locks 3 times before bed. I wedged a chair under the front doorknob. I even put a motion sensor light in the hallway, aimed at the basement door. The 3rd note appeared on the bathroom mirror. I was brushing my teeth on a Thursday morning, barely awake, when I saw the red letters written in what looked like lipstick. Not all doors open from the outside. The lipstick was mine, a shade called Crimson Tide that I hadn't worn in months, shoved to the back of the medicine cabinet. I opened the cabinet door and saw the tube standing upright on the middle shelf, cap off. I never left it like that. I never used that shade at all since the breakup, and I still had the tube. So whoever had written that note had opened my bathroom cabinet, taken the lipstick, written on the mirror, and put it back while I was asleep, while the chair was wedged under the front door, while the basement door remained locked from my side. I called Mrs. Kowalski that afternoon. I knocked on her door upstairs, something I'd never done, and she answered after a long pause, peering through the gap in the chain. I explained the notes, the feeling of being watched. She listened without expression, her silver hair pinned back, a cardigan buttoned to her throat. She said, "That basement's got a door that doesn't lead anywhere. Mr. Albright always kept it locked." Then she closed the door. I stood on her porch for a full minute. A door that doesn't lead anywhere. I went back down to the basement and looked. The walls are concrete block, painted white, with the furnace on one side and the water heater on the other. There's a small window near the ceiling, barred, and on the far wall, behind a stack of old lumber, I found it. A door, old wood, painted over many times, with a skeleton keyhole, but no key. I'd walked past it dozens of times without noticing. The lumber had been neatly arranged to hide it. I pulled the boards away and tried the handle. I pressed my ear to the wood, but the air seeping through the crack smelled different dust and old carpet and something metallic, like rusted pennies. I spent 2 hours searching for the key. I went through every box again, checked the kitchen junk drawer, the tool shed, even the mail slot. Then I remembered the trunk, the combination lock. I brought the trunk upstairs and tried every number I could think of. I tried Mrs. Kowalski's apartment number. I tried the address. I tried 1234 as a desperate last shot. The lock clicked open on my third round of trying. Inside the trunk, beneath a layer of yellowed newspaper clippings, was a bundle wrapped in a blue towel. I unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a key, old blackened iron, about 4 inches long, with a leather tag attached. Handwritten on the tag, in the same left-leaning script as the notes, were the words, "For the room she never left." I sat back on my heels. The clippings were all from local Oregon papers, all from 2016, all about a woman named Alina Vance, aged 29, who disappeared from her home on Castleton Street. No body ever found. No suspects. Case closed as a cold disappearance. The address listed was 1432 Castleton Street. This house, my house. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the key in front of me. The clippings spread out like evidence. Alina Vance vanished on October 14th, 2016. She was a school teacher. No criminal record, no known enemies. Her husband, a man named Daniel Vance, was questioned but released. The case went cold, but the articles never said she lived in this house. They said the 1400 block of Castleton Street, the only house on that block that's a duplex, is 1432, and the previous tenant, Samuel Albright, moved in 2 years after she disappeared. So who is she in the note? She was happy where she was. I kept hearing Mrs. Kowalski's voice. A door that doesn't lead anywhere. I went to the basement at 3 a.m. The chair was still wedged under the front door. The motion light in the hallway was dark. I unlocked the basement door and went down. The bulb flickered as I crossed to the far wall. I inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. I turned it. The mechanism clicked. I pulled the door open. Inside was not a closet. It was a room, about 8 feet by 10 feet, with a low ceiling. And it was not empty. The room smelled of soil and dry rot. A single wooden chair sat in the exact center, facing the door. The walls were covered in writing, not graffiti words. Hundreds, maybe thousands of words, scratched into the old plaster with something sharp. I stepped inside. The floor creaked. I shone my phone's flashlight across the walls and saw phrases repeated over and over. I am still here. He locked me in. The door only opens from inside. No one hears. Some were written in English, some in what looked like Latin, some in symbols I didn't recognize. On the far wall, in larger letters, ELLIE was right. The shadow takes the light. I stood there, breathing shallowly. The air was cold, much colder than the rest of the basement. I noticed a small crack in the foundation near the corner, about the width of a hand, that seemed to lead deeper into the earth. A draft came from it. I knelt down and aimed the flashlight into the crack. I saw nothing but darkness, but I heard something, a whisper, not words, just breath, a slow, deliberate exhale that seemed to come from far below. I scrambled backward and slammed the door shut. The lock clicked automatically. The key was still in my hand. I couldn't tell if I'd locked it from the inside or the outside. I didn't know what I had found. A prison cell, a tomb. The writing suggested Alina Vance was kept here, or that she kept herself here. The phrase, "the shadow takes the light," echoed in my mind. I went upstairs and called the police again. Officer Tran came back with a partner, a sergeant named Davis. I showed them the room. They looked at the walls, the chair, the crack in the foundation. They took photos. They took the key. They asked me questions for 2 hours. Then they left, and they told me to stay away from the basement. The next day, a detective called. He said the room matched the "think about this if that happened to you. What would you do?" The note was tucked beneath the alarm clock, folded once, edges yellowed. Claire picked it up with 2 fingers, expecting a welcome message from the host. Instead, in cramped blue ink, "She was in this room last night. Don't trust the smoke detector." A chill ran through her scalp. She turned the paper over nothing. No signature. The ink was smudged, like someone had pressed too hard, hand trembling. Claire set it back exactly as she found it, then walked to the window. Rain blurred the lights of Bishop, California, a small mountain town shed chosen for a solo creative retreat. She told herself it was a prank, a leftover from a previous guest playing games. But the smoke detector, she stared up at it. White plastic, passive, harmless. A red LED blinked steadily. She couldn't shake the feeling it was watching her. Claire tried to focus on unpacking. Shed booked this 4-night stay through a popular platformer, converted garage apartment behind the main house, listed as Cozy Bishop Hideaway Stargazer's Dream. The photos were charming. Exposed beams, a kitchenette, a telescope by the window. The reality matched, mostly. But the moment she stepped inside, the air felt heavy, like the space had held a long exhale and hadn't let it go. She arranged her toiletries in the tiny bathroom. Noticed the mirror had a thin crack running from the top left corner. She avoided looking at her own reflection. note sat on the nightstand, still folded. She considered texting the host, a woman named Linda, who had a 4.9-star rating and dozens of glowing reviews. But what would she say? Someone left me a creepy message. That seemed paranoid. Claire zipped her suitcase and placed it by the closet. That's when she saw the coat hang her sway. No draft. No window open. Shed come to Bishop for focus. Her freelance graphic design work had been piling up, and the noise of her downtown Lowe's Angels apartment made concentration impossible. The reviews promised quiet nights, star-filled skies, and a host who respected privacy. Claire had messaged Linda twice before booking Gons to confirm the Wi-Fi speed, once to ask about trail access. Linda answered within minutes, friendly but not intrusive. Everything seemed professional. Now, sitting on the pull-out sofa with her laptop balanced on her knees, Claire tried to open her project files, but her cursor hovered over the search bar. She typed smoke detector, hidden camera, before she could stop herself. Dozens of articles popped up. She read 3, then closed the browser. Her hands felt cold. The rain had stopped, leaving a deep, wet silence. From the main house, maybe 30 feet away, she heard a door creak open, then footsteps on gravel. Claire held her breath. Through the gap in the curtains, she saw a man, or at least a silhouette standing in the driveway, not moving, facing her unit. He wore a hooded jacket, hands in pockets. The porch light from the main house cast a weak orange pool around his feet, but his face stayed in shadow. He didn't approach. He just stood there, as if waiting. A full minute passed. Then 2. Claire's phone buzzed. She nearly dropped it. A message from the host. Saw your lights on. Everything okay. Let me know if you need anything. She typed back. Who is that in the driveway? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then no one should be there. I am inside the main house. Stay put. Claire looked up. The figure was gone. The driveway empty, but the gravel still sounded wet. And she could not shake the feeling that the silence itself was listening. She didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every drip from the faucet, every distant car on US 395 sent her heart into her throat. She kept the lamp on, the curtains sealed. At 3:47 a.m., the smoke detector chirped Ansia short. Electronic beep then went silent. Claire stared at it. The red LED was blinking faster than before. A rapid pulse that seemed almost organic. She grabbed a chair, stood on it, and examined the plastic casing. It looked ordinary, but when she pressed her ear close, she could hear a faint hum, higher pitched than the standard electrical buzz. She wanted to pry it open, but the screw head was stripped, as if someone had already tried. She got down, sat on the edge of the bed, and pulled up the listing on her phone. She scrolled the reviews. 53 5-star ratings. 1 4-star from a woman named Maya who wrote, "Lovely space, but the smoke alarm kept me up. Odd beeping. No replies from Linda." Claire clicked Maya's profile. No other reviews. Dawn brought a grudging sense of safety. Claire made instant coffee, kept the curtains open to let in the pale Sierra light. The note shed, sealed in a Ziploc bag, as if preserving evidence. She photographed it, then photographed the smoke detector. She called her boyfriend back in LA, didn't answer, left a voicemail that sounded shaky. "Hey, it's me. Something weird is happening. Can you call me?" She sat at the small dining table and pulled up satellite images of the property on her phone. The main house was a modest ranch-style building. The garage apartment about 20 feet behind it. A fence separated the two, but in the satellite view, she noticed a third structuria narrow rectangle behind a row of pines, barely visible through the canopy, not listed in the property. Claire circled the cabin. No windows on the sides, just the one at the front, which was boarded over with plywood. The boards were nailed from the inside-ish. Could see the nail heads poking through. Someone had sealed this place deliberately. She pressed her ear to the door, but the air around the cabin felt cooler, almost refrigerated, even though the morning was warming. She thought of the note. Don't trust the smoke detector. She thought of the figure in the driveway, and now this hidden room. Her rational mind told her to leave. Pack the car, drive back to LA, cancel the booking. But a deeper part of her, the part that had spent years ignoring red flags in relationships, in jobs, in herself, that part needed to know. She took a photo of the padlock. Then she walked back to the garage apartment and messaged Linda. "What's the cabin behind the property?" The reply came in under a minute. "Storage. Previous owner left junk. I keep it locked for liability. Hope you're enjoying your stay." Too fast. Too cheerful. Claire didn't believe her. She shouldn't have looked, but the compulsion was stronger than fear. Claire opened every drawer in the kitchenette. Cutlery, dish towels, a flashlight with dead batteries. Under the sink, behind a bottle of bleach, her fingers brushed against something taped to the pipe. A key, silver, standard deadbolt size, taped with yellow duct tape. It had been there a long time. She peeled it off, held it up to the light. The tape left sticky residue on her thumb. She knew, with a certainty that made her stomach drop, that this key fit the padlock on the cabin. She stood in the kitchen, heart pounding, coffee gone cold. The smoke detector gave a single low hum. Claire grabbed her phone, opened the camera, and started recording. This is day 2 of my stay at the Bishop Airbnb. I found a hidden key. I am going to check the cabin. Her voice cracked. She pressed record and walked out the door. The padlock clicked open with a smoothness that surprised her. It was well oiled, used frequently. Claire pulled the chain free, the metal clinking against the hasp. She pushed the cabin door open. It swung inward on silent hinges. The interior was dark, lit only by the rectangle of daylight from the doorway. She stepped inside and hit a small light switch on the wall. A single bare bulb flickered to life. The cabin was one room, maybe 10 feet by 12. Against the far wall, a cot with a thin mattress, no sheets. In the corner, a metal folding chair. And on the floor, scattered like fallen leaves, dozens of Polaroid photographs. Claire knelt, picked one up. A woman, mid-20s, sleeping on a bed that looked exactly like the one in the garage apartment. The angle was from above. The smoke detector. She picked up another. A different woman, same bed, eyes open, looking at the camera with a dawning horror. Claire's breath went shallow. She counted the photos. Different women. Some she recognized from the review profiles Maya. The one who complained about the smoke alarm. She was in here, asleep. And then Claire found her own photo, taken last night. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the note, staring at the smoke detector. The photo was slightly blurry, but unmistakable. Think about this if that happened to you. What would you do? Claire dropped the photos as if they'd burned her. She backed away, hit the wall, slid down to a crouch. Her phone was still recording, but she'd forgotten. She pulled it out, stopped the video, and opened the dial pad. Her thumb hovered over the call button, but then she heard the crunch of gravel outside. Someone walking toward the cabin. She looked around for a hiding place. The cot, the chair. She pressed herself against the wall beside the door, held her breath. The footsteps stopped at the threshold. A shadow fell across the floor. Then a voice, calm and female, came from the doorway. I see you found my little collection. It was Linda, the host. She sounded almost amused. You weren't supposed to be here until the 3rd night. They always find it on the 3rd night. Claire's mind raced. The voice from the phone messages. The friendly hostage was the same person, but the woman in the doorway didn't look like the profile photo. That photo had shown a smiling woman in her 50s, gray-streaked hair, grandmotherly. This woman was younger, maybe early 40s, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that held no warmth. She held a device in her hand, a remote, with a single button. The smoke detector has a live feed," Linda said, stepping inside. "I monitor it from my phone. I saw you watching it. I knew you'd come here. They always do." She clicked the remote. Somewhere in the garage apartment, Claire heard a click, then a hiss. "The heater. The cabin is sealed. No windows, remember." Linda smiled. "You have two choices. Stay here and breathe slowly, or run back to the apartment. But I've already started the gas. You'd pass out before you reached the driveway." Claire's throat tightened. She felt the first chemical tang in the air. Faint, but unmistakable. Claire managed. Her voice came out thin, strangled. Linda tilted her head, as if the question was naive. "Because you come here alone. You trust reviews. You ignore the little signs. The note was supposed to scare you off, but you stayed. That means you're the type who can't let go. You'd make a beautiful addition to the collection." She gestured at the Polaroids. "I don't kill them. I just keep them for a while, long enough to learn everything. Their fears, their passwords, their family contacts. Then I let them go. And they never tell anyone. Because who would believe that an Airbnb host drugged them and photographed them for a week?" Claire's eyes darted to the door. Linda was blocking it, but she was smaller. Could she shove past? The remote was the key. If she could grab it, disable the gas. "The police are already coming," Claire lied. Linda laughed. "I have a signal jammer in the main house. No service within 100 feet. Uray cut off." Claire's phone screen was blank. No bars. She was alone. Claire didn't think. She lunged. Her shoulder caught Linda in the ribs, and the remote flew from her hand, skittering across the wooden floor. They both scrambled for it. Claire's fingers closed on plastic, just as Linda grabbed her hair, yanking her backward. Claire twisted, kicked out, caught Linda in the knee. The woman cried out, stumbled. Claire rolled to her feet, remote in hand, and smashed the button. She pressed again. The hiss from the apartment continued. She looked at the remote. It had a single red LED, now dark. Shed broke in it, or it was always a decoy. Linda was getting up, breathing heavily, a cruel smile spreading. That was the gas trigger. You just ensured it stays on. Claire turned and ran. Out the smell hit him first, wet earth, old copper, and something organic that didn't belong 50 feet under a commercial slab. Ryan Marsh pressed his palm flat against the limestone box and felt warmth coming off the stone. Not heat from geothermal activity or buried pipes. A pulse, slow, measured, like something breathing from the other side. The demolition crew had stopped working 3 hours ago. They'd uncovered the chamber by accident with the excavator bucket. And now Ryan stood alone inside the Costco Foundation excavation site. Flashlight trained on the object they'd unearthed. His phone showed no signal down here. The air was thick, almost syrup thick, coating his throat with every breath. He should have sealed the site and called the county archaeologist. But Ryan Marsh had never been good at walking away from old things that wanted to be found. 40 minutes earlier, the foreman had radioed him down. "You're gonna want to see this, architect." Ryan had been up in the mobile office, reviewing the structural load calculations for the new retail warehouse, the one that was supposed to sit directly over this spot. Clatsop County soil reports had flagged nothing unusual. No burial sites, no utility crossings. But when Ryan reached the bottom of the excavation, he understood why the backhoe operator had gone pale. The limestone box was embedded in a layer of compacted clay that predated the original 1980s Costco construction. Someone had buried this thing deliberately, and they'd sealed it with a lead-based mortar that crumbled into gray dust when the excavator teeth clipped the edge. The foreman wanted to break it open on the spot. Ryan overruled him. He told the crew to go home. He told himself it was procedure, but the truth was simpler. He wanted to be the first one to see what was inside. Ryan Marsh was 37 years old, a senior architectural consultant for Pacific Northwest Commercial Development, and his primary personality flaw was a pathological inability to abandon a mystery. It had cost him 1 marriage, 2 serious relationships, and nearly his professional license. After he spent 3 weeks illegally excavating under a condemned schoolhouse in Astoria, looking for a Prohibition-era tunnel system that turned out to be a drainage pipe. He told himself this was different. This was his job. Site inspection, due diligence. But standing in the pit with the limestone box humming against his palm, he felt the same familiar pull, the same quiet compulsion that made him ignore the sensible voice in his head. He knelt down and examined the mortar seal. Someone had engraved a line of symbols into the stone lid angular, geometric. Nothing he recognized from indigenous Pacific Northwest petroglyphs or pioneer masonry. The symbols weren't worn. They looked fresh, as if carved yesterday. He should have gone home that night. Instead, Ryan checked into the Astoria Bay Motel, 8 miles from the site, and spent 3 hours researching the symbols on his laptop. The motel Wi-Fi was slow, but he managed to find one partial match in a digitized archive of colonial-era maritime superstitions. A paper from the University of Oregon Library System about sailor talismans on the Columbia River bar. The symbol set matched something called the Warden's Lock, a folk tradition from the 1840s among European settlers who believed certain coastal spirits could be physically contained in stone boxes. Ryan laughed at first. Then he pulled up the county property records and traced the ownership chain for the Costco land back to 1852. The original deed holder was a man named Silas Voss, a failed lighthouse keeper who disappeared in the winter of 1854 after neighbors reported hearing rhythmic knocking coming from his root cellar at night. The knocking, according to the local historian's notes, never stopped. At 2:47 a.m., Ryan drove back to the construction site. He told himself he needed to photograph the box in better light for the county report. He brought a crowbar from his truck. The security fence was chain link with a padlock he had the code for. The excavation pit was dark. The temporary lighting rigs switched off for the night. Ryan descended the earthen ramp alone, flashlight beam cutting through the damp air. The limestone box looked different, now darker. The surface sheened with moisture that hadn't been there before. He touched the lid again and felt the warmth, stronger now, almost feverish. The symbols seemed to have deepened, their carved channels filled with something dark that wasn't shadow. Ryan pressed his ear to the stone. Then, faintly, a low vibration that passed through the bone of his skull and settled somewhere behind his eyes. He stepped back. He should have stopped. He wedged the crowbar under the lid instead. The limestone lid didn't lift, it shattered. One clean break along a fault line Ryan hadn't seen, and the top half slid off and struck the clay floor with a wet thud. The sound echoed up the pit walls and disappeared into the empty Oregon sky. Ryan stood frozen, crowbar still in his hands, staring at what the box contained. It wasn't bones. It wasn't treasure. It was a cavity, perfectly smooth, lined with the same dark material that had filled the carved symbols, and inside the cavity lay a human hand, severed at the wrist, preserved in a state that defied the 170 years it had spent underground. The skin was pale, but not decayed. The fingers slightly curled as if reaching for something. The fingernails were clean. There was no blood, no smell of rot. Ryan's first rational thought was that it was a forensic replica, a hoax. Then the hand twitched. The ring finger curled inward, grasping at the empty air. Ryan stumbled backward and fell onto the clay floor, scrambling away from the box on his hands and knees. He watched it for 5 full minutes from the far side of the pit. The hand continued to move slow, arthritic movements, the fingers clenching and unclenching like a sleeping person's hand twitching through a dream. At one point, the thumb began tapping against the stone lining in a distinct rhythm. 4 taps, 3 taps, 7 taps, the same sequence, repeated 3 times before stopping. Ryan's brain cycled through explanations. Nerve response after pressure release. A preserved tendon contracting. Some kind of mechanical apparatus hidden beneath the skin. But the flesh looked real. The knuckles moved naturally. He could see fine hairs on the forearm, small scars. The texture of a living person's hand. He thought about Silas Voss, the lighthouse keeper, who disappeared after reporting knocking from his cellar. He thought about the settlers who believed in coastal spirits that could be physically contained. He thought about the warden's lock, and then he thought about who had owned that hand, and whether they had been conscious when it was put in the box. Ryan called the site foreman at 4:30 a.m. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried the county sheriff's office non-emergency line, but the operator told him an officer would be dispatched in the morning. He didn't tell her about the moving hand. He said there was an artifact that needed to be secured. Then he sat down against the earthen wall and watched the hand continue its rhythm. The tapping had stopped, but the fingers had begun tracing symbols against the inside of the stone cavity, the same symbols that had been carved into the lid. Ryan recognized them now. They were being drawn in reverse, as if the hand was writing from the inside out. He pulled out his phone and filmed it. 30 seconds of footage. The playback showed the hand clearly, unmistakably, moving of its own accord. He backed the video up to iCloud. Then he made a decision that he would replay in his mind for the rest of his life. He reached into the box and picked up the hand. The skin was warm, not room temperature, warm, living warm. The same heat you'd feel holding another person's hand on a summer evening. Ryan felt the fingers curl around his wrist with gentle pressure, almost like an infant grasping a parent's thumb. The sensation wasn't horrifying. That was the worst part. It felt familiar. It felt like the hand belonged there, against his skin, as if some connection had been waiting to be completed. He looked at the wrist. The severed end showed cleanly cut bone, dried tissue, the unmistakable evidence of amputation. But there was no blood on his hand, no blood on the stone. The cavity inside the box was completely dry. Ryan held the hand for 60 seconds, maybe longer. He lost track of time. At some point, he became aware that the symbols on the box lid had started to fade. The carved lines filling themselves in with pale gray dust that crumbled away when he touched it. Think about this if you found something that should have been dead, but was still alive, still waiting. Would you have put it back? Or would you have done exactly what Ryan did? He didn't put it back. He carried the hand up the earthen ramp, wrapped it in a clean rag from his truck, and placed it in the passenger seat. He told himself he was taking it to a hospital, to a university, to someone who could explain what he was holding. But instead of driving toward Astoria, he found himself turning onto the old coastal highway, heading north toward the abandoned lighthouse at Cape Disappointment. The hand rested on the passenger seat, fingers occasionally twitching, the wrist still showing no sign of decay or moisture loss. Ryan's hands gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The fog thickened as he drove, reducing visibility to a few car lengths. He passed no other vehicles. The radio cycled through static and fragments of old country songs. And at one point, he could have sworn he heard a voice underneath the static low, calm, speaking in a language he didn't recognize, but almost understood. The hand on the passenger seat began tapping against the rag again. 4 taps, 3 taps, 7 taps, the same rhythm from the box. The Cape Disappointment Lighthouse had been decommissioned in the 1970s and left to the weather. Ryan had visited it once as a child, remembered the ranger talking about the keepers who served there, the shipwrecks they tried to warn, the isolation that drove some of them mad. He parked at the base of the access road and walked the rest of the way, the hand wrapped in the rag and held against his chest like an infant. The fog muffled all sound except the crash of waves against the cliffs below. The hand was warmer now, almost hot, and Ryan could feel the fingers pressing against his ribs through the fabric. He reached the lighthouse door bolted, chained, a county park's sign warning of structural instability. The hand in his arms twitched violently, and Ryan felt the fingers curl into a fist, then relax. Then the fist struck his chest once, 3 times, the same rhythm. Ryan looked down at the rag bundle and understood, with a clarity that felt borrowed from someone else's mind, that the hand was trying to tell him something. It had been knocking for 170 years. The chain was old. The padlock rusted through. Ryan broke it with a rock from the shoreline. The door swung inward on corroded hinges, revealing a dark spiral staircase leading up into the tower. The air inside was cold and still, smelling of salt and bird droppings, and something that reminded Ryan of the box, that same organic presence. He stepped inside. The hand against his chest stopped moving. The warmth didn't fade, but the fingers relaxed completely, as if the hand had finally arrived somewhere it recognized. Ryan began climbing, one hand on the railing, the other cradling the bundle. The stairs groaned under his weight. The light from the open door faded behind him as he ascended. At the first landing, he found a small room with a wooden cot, a rusted stove, a shelf of rotted books. The hand began moving again, not tapping this time, but pointing, the index finger extended, aiming toward a loose floorboard in the corner of the room. Ryan knelt down and pried the board up with his fingers. Underneath, in a leather pouch sealed with wax, he found a journal. The cover read, Silas Voss, 1852. The first pages were mundane supply inventories, weather logs, complaints about the loneliness of the station. But halfway through, the tone shifted. Voss wrote about hearing knocking in the walls of the lighthouse at night, about finding strange symbols carved into the foundation stones that he couldn't account for, about a woman who appeared at his door during a storm, her hand wrapped in bandages, asking for shelter. He let her in. She stayed for 3 days. On the third night, he wrote, she told him she was not entirely human. She was a fragment, a memory that had learned to walk. And she had been fleeing something that lived beneath the Columbia River. She asked Voss to help her hide, to cut away the part of her that could still be tracked, seal it in stone, and bury it where no water could reach. The journal described the amputation in clinical detail. Voss wrote that she felt no pain, that she smiled as he worked. The clock on my dashboard read 11:47 p.m., and I had been driving through Glenwood Canyon for what felt like hours. The rain came down in sheets, turning the winding curves of Interstate 70 into a blurred tunnel of wet asphalt and reflective lines. I knew this route. I had driven it a dozen times before, always marveling at the sheer cliffs and the Colorado River rushing alongside. But tonight, something was wrong. The same sign for the Grizzly Creek rest area had appeared 3 times. The same bridge with the rusted guardrail. The same exit for Hanging Lake, which I knew was closed for repairs. I passed it, then 10 minutes later, I passed it again. My phone had no signal. The GPS was stuck on a loading icon, and the gas gauge, which had read half a tank when I left Denver, now hovered dangerously close to empty. I pulled over onto the shoulder, engine idling, and tried to slow my breathing. That's when I saw the headlights behind Metro pinpricks of white light that didn't move. They just sat there, maybe 100 yards back, as if waiting. I watched those headlights for a full minute. They didn't approach, didn't swerve, didn't flash, just sat there like a photograph. I told myself it was just another driver who had also pulled over, maybe checking a map, maybe waiting out the storm. But that didn't explain the rest area, appearing 3 times. I pulled my phone out again, hoping for at least a single bar. The screen showed 11:47 p.m., same as before. I blinked. No, it had to be later. I had been driving since 10:30. I checked my watch at cheap Casio. I always warned it read 11:47 as well. A cold feeling crawled up my spine. I looked back at the mirror. The headlights were gone. Now there was nothing behind me but fog and the faint outline of the canyon wall. I turned off the engine to save gas. The silence was thick, broken only by the patter of rain on the roof. I sat there, heart thudding, trying to think of a rational explanation. Maybe I was exhausted. Maybe the altitude was getting to Meth Canyon Sap at over 6,000 feet. But I knew deep down that wasn't it. Something about this stretch of road had shifted, like the landscape itself had been folded into a loop. 3 days earlier, I had been in a coffee shop in Denver, editing photos from a freelance assignment. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 34, and I make a living as a travel photographer. It's not glamorous. Most of my work is for regional magazines, hiking blogs, and the occasional stock photo site. But I love it. I love the solitude of the road. The way a landscape can feel like a secret when you catch it in the right light. My one flaw, the one that gets me into trouble, is that I can't let a mystery go. If I see something odd, a trail that isn't on the map, a door that shouldn't be there, a story that doesn't add up, I have to investigate. It's why I ended up in Glenwood Canyon in the first place. A few weeks earlier, I had been hired to photograph a series of abandoned mining camps near the old town of Gilman. The editor wanted atmospheric shots, the kind that make you feel like you're walking through a ghost town. I spent 2 days there, climbing through collapsed buildings and rusted machinery. On the second night, I met a man in a bar in Glenwood Springs. He was old, maybe 80, with leathery skin and eyes that seemed to look through you. He said he used to work the mines. Then he told me something that stuck. You ever hear about the missing time? He asked, swirling his whiskey. He didn't wait for an answer. Back in '78, a trucker named Earl Whittaker disappeared on I-70 through the canyon. They found his rig 3 days later, still running, empty gas tank. No sign of him. But 2 weeks after, he shows up at a diner in Grand Junction, wearing the same clothes, saying he'd only been gone a few hours. He claimed he drove through a patch of fog and came out the other side in a place that wasn't right, like the colors were off. The air felt wrong. They locked him up in a psych ward for 6 months. I remember laughing, thinking it was just an old man's tall tale. But he leaned in close, and I caught the smell of tobacco and stale beer. That ain't the only one. There's reports going back to the 1800s. Prospectors, travelers, even a whole bus in 1951. They go into the canyon, and sometimes they don't come out. Sometimes they come out days later with no memory. Sometimes they come out changed. He tapped the bar. The canyon has a pocket, a place where time gets folded. You drive through it, and you might not come back the same way you went in. I paid my tab and left, telling myself it was just local folklore, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. So when the assignment for a series on Colorado's historic highways came up, I volunteered. I told myself it was just work, but the real reason was that old man's story. I wanted to see the canyon for myself, to prove that it was just a stretch of road like any other. I left Denver at 10:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, camera bag in the passenger seat, a cooler full of sandwiches and water. The drive was beautiful. At first, the front range gave way to rolling hills. Then the dramatic red rock of the Rocky Mountains. By the time I hit the exit for Glenwood Canyon, the sky had turned gray. Rain started spitting against the windshield. I merged onto I-70 and entered the canyon, the walls rising up on both sides, the river churning below. The road twisted and turned, and I felt a strange pressure in my ears, like I was descending too fast. I checked the clock, 11:21 a.m. I drove for another 20 minutes, enjoying I tried to convince myself the clock had frozen due to a software glitch, but the red pickup truck that was harder to ignore. It stayed exactly 2 car lengths behind me. No matter how fast or slow I drove, I sped up to 75. It matched. I slowed to 45. It matched. I pulled into the rest area, hoping to let it pass. The rest area was empty. No other cars, no people. The truck followed me in, then parked 3 spaces away. I sat there, engine running, watching it. No one got out. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see the driver. I felt my mouth go dry. I made a decision. I would get out, walk to the restroom, and see if the truck moved. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe someone else was also lost. I grabbed my small camera, more for comfort than anything, and stepped out into the rain. The air was cold and wet, and the smell of pine and wet rock filled my nose. I walked toward the restroom building, a concrete structure with a slanted roof. Halfway there, I glanced back. The truck hadn't moved, but now the driver's door was open. No one was inside. I froze, scanning the parking lot. Nothing moved except the rain. Then I heard a sound of faint, mechanical clicking, like a camera shutter, coming from the canyon wall behind me. I turned so fast, I nearly slipped. The clicking stopped. The canyon wall was just rock and scrub brush. No one there, but I felt a presency and awareness like something was watching from the shadows. I hurried into the restroom, locking the door behind me. The fluorescent light above the mirror flickered, casting a sickly yellow glow. I splashed cold water on my face. In the mirror, I looked pale, my hair plastered to my scalp. I checked my watch again. Still 11:21. The clock on the wall of the restroom read 11:21. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took a deep breath and forced myself to think. The old man's story echoed in my mind. A pocket where time gets folded. I had driven into that pocket, and now I was stuck. I unlocked the door and stepped out. The red pickup truck was gone. The parking lot was empty, but on the ground, right in front of my car, there was a single object. A rusty miner's pickaxe, old and worn, with a wooden handle stained dark. I hadn't seen it before. I picked it up. The handle was cold, and it felt unnaturally heavy. I threw it into my trunk and got back in the car. I needed to get out of this canyon. I drove toward the eastbound exit. The only way I knew led back toward Denver. But the road curved, and I ended up at the same rest area again. The same pickaxe was no longer in my trunk I checked, but there was a new object on the passenger seat. A Polaroid photograph, faded and curled. It showed a woman standing in front of an old mine entrance. Her face was blurry, but her jacket looked exactly like mine. I stared at the photograph, my hands trembling. The woman in the image wore the same red North Face jacket I had on, the same hiking boots, the same dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. But the background mine, entrance was not a place I remembered. It was a gaping black hole in the side of a cliff, surrounded by rusted rails and old wooden beams. A cold realization crept over me. This photo was taken here, in this canyon, but not now. The paper was old, the edges curled, the colors faded to sepia. I tried to rationalize. Someone must have left it in my car, but I had locked the doors, and the pickaxe had appeared in the exact spot where I had seen the empty truck. I put the photo in my glove compartment and decided to drive the opposite direction westbound, deeper into the canyon, toward the town of Glenwood Springs. Maybe I could find a gas station with a working phone. The rain eased to a drizzle as I drove, the canyon walls closing in. The road narrowed. I passed a sign that read, "No services," next 23 miles. Then the fog rolled in again, thick as cotton, and when it cleared, the landscape had changed. The asphalt was no longer smooth, it was cracked and overgrown, gravel poking through. The guardrails were rusted, bent, some missing entirely. The canyon seemed older, more wild, as if I had driven backward in time. I looked at the odometer. I had only gone 6 miles, but the world around me felt like it belonged to a different century. I pulled over, engine idling, and stepped out. The air smelled different instead of pine and rain. There was a metallic tang, like iron and old dust. The Colorado River, usually a bright turquoise, was a muddy brown, moving sluggishly. I took a few steps toward the edge, and that's when I saw the bridge. It was the same bridge I had crossed earlier, but now it looked ancient. Steel beams were pitted with rust, the wooden planks rotting, holes gaping through. A warning sign hung crooked. Danger, do not cross. I hadn't seen that sign before. I turned back to my car. In the side mirror, I caught a glimpse of movement on the canyon wall. A figure, small, distant, standing on a ledge maybe 50 feet up. It was a man, dressed in old-fashioned clothes of flannel shirt, jeans, a brimmed hat. He was just standing there, staring down at me. I raised my hand, a weak wave. He didn't respond. Instead, he turned and walked into a crack in the rock face, disappearing like a ghost. My heart pounded. I fumbled for my camera, but by the time I raised it, the ledge was empty. I took a photo anyway. When I looked at the screen, the image showed nothing but rock, but the timestamp on the file read Jan 1, 1978. That's impossible. My camera's date was set automatically. I checked the settings. It was synced to my phone, which had no signal, but the date was correct in the settings October 14, 2025. Yet the photo said 1978. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. That number 1978. The year the trucker Earl Whittaker disappeared. I stood there, rain dripping off my nose, staring at the impossible date. The old man at the bar had mentioned 1978. Earl Whittaker, the trucker who vanished. And now my camera was claiming I had photographed something from that year. I tried to take another photo of the Canyona normal one, just to test it. The timestamp now read January 1, 1978. Every photo I took defaulted to that date. I reset the camera, removed the battery, inserted it again. Still 1978. I wanted to throw the camera into the river, but it was my livelihood. Instead, I got back into the car and drove, determined to find a way out. The road curved, and I saw lights at a gas station, an old-fashioned one, with a single pump and a neon sign that buzzed open. I pulled in, relieved. A bell jingled as I entered the small store. The interior was straight out of a 1970s time capsule. Wood-paneled walls, a cooler with glass bottles of soda, a rack of maps featuring states that no longer looked right. Behind the counter sat a man with a thick mustache, wearing a brown uniform shirt He didn't look up when I walked in. I asked if he had a phone. He pointed to a rotary dial on the counter. I picked it up. No dial tone. I asked him what year it was. He looked at me then, and his eyes were empty like glass. "It's always 1978 here, ma'am," he said. "You must be new." I stood frozen, the rotary phone receiver cold in my hand. "What do you mean? Always 1978? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man shrugged, his movements slow, mechanical. "This stretch of road has been 1978 for as long as I've been here. Some days the trucks come through. They stop, fill up, drive off. Sometimes they come back. Sometimes they don't." He pointed out the window. "You see that canyon wall? There's a tunnel, a mine entrance. You go in there, you might find the way out. But nobody." Thank you for listening. If you're still awake, please leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to our channel. Sharing this with your friends helps others find this quiet place too. Good night. The rain will stay with you.